The rain poured relentlessly, streaking down the glass windows of Morgan Enterprises like silver tears. Inside, the air was thick with the faint scent of polished wood and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Angela Carter sat at her desk, fingers moving gracefully over the keyboard as she finished the quarterly report, something she'd worked on late into the night. She was only 23, but her dedication and intelligence had already earned her a reputation as one of the most promising employees in the building. Still, there was a heaviness in her chest. For the past few weeks, a secret had been quietly growing inside her, one she hadn't told anyone except the man responsible for it, Richard Morgan, her boss. Richard had been charming in the beginning, attentive, encouraging, even vulnerable at times. Their relationship had been a dangerous blend of professional respect and personal intimacy, a line Angela never intended to cross but did when loneliness and admiration blurred her judgment. But everything changed the moment she told him she was pregnant. That afternoon, his assistant's voice came over the intercom. "Angela, Mr. Morgan would like to see you in his office." Her stomach twisted. She smoothed her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked toward the large mahogany door. Inside, Richard sat behind his imposing desk, the city skyline stretching endlessly behind him. His suit was sharp, his tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes were colder than she'd ever seen. "Close the door," he said without looking up. Angela obeyed, her palms damp. Without any preamble, Richard slid a white envelope across the desk. "Your services are no longer required here," he said flatly. For a moment, she couldn't process the words. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't working out." "It's best you move on," he replied, still avoiding her gaze. Her throat tightened. "Is this because of—" "I'm not discussing personal matters in the workplace," he cut in sharply, his tone like steel. The sound of rain against the windows grew louder, filling the suffocating silence. Angela stared at the envelope, her termination papers, her mind racing. The job had been her lifeline. And now, pregnant and alone, she felt the ground slipping away beneath her feet. She swallowed hard, willing herself not to cry in front of him. Standing tall, she slid the envelope into her bag. "I hope one day you realize what you've done," she said quietly. Richard didn't respond. She turned, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. The warm hum of office chatter felt foreign now, like another world she no longer belonged to. By the time she stepped outside, the rain had soaked her to the skin, but she didn't care. She pressed a protective hand against her stomach. The years blurred into a rhythm of survival. Angela's mornings began before sunrise and ended long after midnight. She worked wherever she could, cleaning offices while the city slept, pouring coffee for strangers in a bustling diner during the day, and taking temporary office jobs whenever the opportunity arose. Through it all, her son, David, was the center of her universe. The moment she first held him, with his small fingers curling instinctively around hers, she knew every sacrifice would be worth it. She whispered promises into his tiny ear, promises that she would never let him feel unwanted, never let him doubt his worth. Angela never told David about Richard. Not his name, not his position, not the rejection that had left her standing in the rain that day. She didn't want her son's sense of self tied to a man who had turned his back on them. Instead, she filled his life with stories of strength, perseverance, and kindness. Money was always tight, but Angela became an expert at making it stretch. She clipped coupons, bought second-hand clothes, and cooked simple meals that somehow still tasted like home. At Christmas, when she couldn't afford new toys, she painted and restored old ones, wrapping them carefully so David would still feel the magic of the season. David grew quickly, not just in height but in character. He was curious, thoughtful, and fiercely determined. When he brought home report cards covered in A's, Angela's eyes would shine with pride. He didn't know that she sometimes skipped meals to afford his school supplies, or that she mended the same pair of shoes until they could barely hold together. To him, she was simply Mom, the strongest person he knew. When David was 14, he came home one day clutching a flyer for a science fair. "I want to enter," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. The entry fee was more than Angela could spare that month. She looked at him, saw the spark in his eyes, and knew she couldn't say no. That week, she took on an extra cleaning shift, scrubbing floors until her knees ached, just so he could participate. David didn't just enter the science fair, he won first place. The look on his face as they handed him the trophy was something Angela would carry with her forever. By the time David graduated from high school, he had earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university. Angela stood in the crowd that day, her heart swelling as he walked across the stage in his cap and gown. Every long night, every sacrifice, every tear had led to this moment. The city skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, the glass towers reflecting streaks of gold. David Carter stood in the marble lobby of Morgan Enterprises, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly, a gift from his mother for this very meeting. He had worked for years to get here, a chance to pitch an innovative community development proposal to one of the most influential businessmen in the city. He rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor, the hum of the machinery mixing with the steady beat of his heart. When the doors slid open, he stepped into an office space that exuded quiet wealth, sleek furniture, soft lighting, and a wall of glass revealing the entire city below. The receptionist gave him a polite smile. "Mr. Morgan is expecting you. You can go right in." David thanked her and walked toward the large oak door at the end of the hallway. He knocked once. "Come in," a deep voice replied. Inside, Richard Morgan sat behind an expansive desk, reviewing a stack of papers. His silver hair was neatly combed, his charcoal suit immaculate. He looked up, and for the briefest moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. David crossed the room and extended his hand. "David Carter. Thank you for meeting with me, sir." Richard shook his hand firmly, studying the young man. There was something familiar in his features, those sharp eyes, the strong jawline, but he couldn't place it. "Have a seat," he said, motioning to the leather chair across from him. David opened his portfolio, sliding the proposal across the desk. "This project is focused on transforming underdeveloped neighborhoods through sustainable housing and small business support. It's more than just profit, it's about impact." Richard leaned back, scanning the first page. The passion in David's voice caught his attention. This wasn't the usual cold, calculated pitch he often heard. There was conviction here. As David spoke, Richard found himself distracted, not by the content, but by the young man himself. His tone, his posture, and those eyes. Somewhere deep in his memory, a shadow of recognition stirred, though he didn't yet understand why. Then David paused. His voice softened, but his gaze stayed steady. "Before we go any further, there's something you should know. My mother once worked for you, a long time ago." Angela Carter. Richard's breath caught. The name struck him like a blow. Images he had buried for decades came rushing back, the rain-soaked day, the look on Angela's face as she left his office, the envelope he had pushed across the desk. He cleared his throat, masking the sudden tightness in his chest. "I see," he said slowly, his composure faltering for the first time in years. David didn't flinch. "She raised me on her own. She never asked for your help. But she taught me everything I know about integrity, hard work, and compassion." The office fell silent. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but in that room, tea. Richard's fingers tightened around the edge of David's proposal, but he wasn't seeing the words anymore. He was seeing her, Angela, 24 years younger, standing in his office with rain dripping from her hair, trying to hold her dignity as he ended her career. Back then, he had told himself it was necessary, that mixing business and personal life was a mistake. But in truth, it had been cowardice. Now, the consequences of that moment were sitting across from him, looking him in the eye. David's tone was calm, but it carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. "She never told me the details. She never spoke your name until I found it myself. But I know she walked out of here with nothing, and still built a life for us. She gave me everything, and she did it without bitterness." Richard swallowed hard. He had built an empire on negotiations and calculated moves, but he felt utterly unprepared for this conversation. David. I owe your mother more than I can ever repay. David leaned back slightly, his expression measured. I'm not here for repayment. I'm here because I believe in this project. I believe in helping people who've been overlooked, people like my mother. The words pierced through the years of Richard's self-protection. In that moment, he saw himself not as the powerful CEO, but as the man who had failed to stand up when it mattered most. He set the proposal down and looked directly at David. You're right. I wronged her. And I've spent far too long pretending the past doesn't exist. I can't change what I did, but I can change what I do now. Richard reached for the phone on his desk and called his assistant. Cancel my afternoon meetings. Then he turned back to David. I want to fund your project, fully. And I want the first housing development to be named the Angela Carter Community. People should know her name and her story. David's composure wavered for the first time. His jaw tightened, and his voice was quieter now. That would mean a lot to her. More than you know. But Richard wasn't finished. And I'd like you to come on board, not just as a partner in this project, but in the company. You have vision, integrity, things I've let slip through my fingers over the years. David nodded slowly. I'll think about it. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the people who need it. Richard gave a faint, almost humbled smile. Then you're already a better man than I was at your age. Later that evening, when David told Angela about the meeting, she sat in stunned silence before tears welled in her eyes. She wasn't crying because of the money or the recognition, she was crying because her son had faced the man who had once broken her, and instead of anger, he had chosen a path of purpose.